Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I really hope you're all well. It is July 31st, which means one thing and one thing only. We're doing a wrap up. So my reading in July was okay. In terms of like 5-star reads, it was very good month. But in terms of like volume of books read, it was quite a quiet one. But I feel like my recent life announcement video probably explains why it was quite quiet, because obviously I was so busy in July just trying to organize like logistics, because like there was just a lot going on. So I finished 9.5 books in the month of July. The half is Glint by Raven Kennedy, which I'm currently halfway through. So obviously I'm not going to talk about that yet because I've not finished it and I don't have kind of fully fleshed out thoughts and feelings on the book. But we will begin with the wonder that is Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home by our queen Jessa Hastings. This was of course a 5-star, 10 out of 10, no notes, just perfection, sheer and utter perfection. So Magnolia Parks is effectively a Gossip Girl if it was set in London. So it follows a group of friends in their early 20s, and these guys are like the pinnacle of London's social elite. They're uber wealthy, uber stylish, and they have the most ridiculously toxic friendships and relationships, and it's just so much fun to read from. I honestly love them so much. So the Magnolia Parks universe is made up of currently 4 books, but soon to be 7 I think in total. So we have Magnolia Parks, and we also have Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home. So this is book 1 and book 2 in the Magnolia Parks section of the Magnolia Parks universe. Book 3 is to come out very soon. And then you also have Daisy Hates and Daisy Hates the Great Undoing, which are basically set on the same kind of timeline. It's just different perspectives of the same events, and you learn little bits about all the characters in each book. So you see like different snippets in these ones and different POVs, and the same with these, and they're very good. They're completely interconnected, work on the same timeline, and they are incredible. So the order that you need to read these in is Magnolia Parks, Daisy Hates, Magnolia Parks The Long Way Home, and then Daisy Hates the Great Undoing. For reference, literally all of these are 5 stars for me. It's a 5-star series and each individual book has been 5 stars. They're incredible. But that was the first book that I read this month. So then I read Lovers by Fiona Cole, which is the second book in the Voyeurs series, and this focuses on Karina and Jake, who both work for their parents' marketing agency. Both their parents are owners, and they've been kind of pushing the two of them together over the years. So in the end they've kind of caved to the pressure, they've got engaged. But as we kind of join them in this book, there's like distance in their relationship that they're both aware of, but both not kind of willing to confront and figure out why the distance is there. And then they're bringing on a new client who happens to be the owner of Voyeur. So he takes them to the club one night and lets them go and explore and just figure out what the club is all about. Voyeur is of course a voyeurism sex club. So these guys get introduced to lots of new things, and they decide they want to kind of confront their biggest fantasy, which is bringing a second person into the relationship. But it turns out that that person is actually somebody from Jake's past, and things just don't go according to plan for them at all. So this book was interesting. Like I did enjoy the first book in the Voyeurs series. The only problem I had with it was the power imbalance dynamic between the two main characters, because he was a teacher and he was her teacher, and I just found that power imbalance like a bit much. So first of all, I gave this one 2 stars, and second of all, I just want to say justice for Karina, because I was so annoyed at how she was treated the entire way through this novel. So this book honestly just felt like smut for the sake of smut for me. Like I spent a lot of the book trying to figure out like where the actual plot was, because it was just that sex scene on top of sex scene on top of sex scene, which is fine if that's what you're going into this for, but I was interested in the story and I was interested in the relationships, and for that reason it fell a little bit flat for me. I really did not like that Karina was just used as a vessel to get to Jack and Jake. Like that to me just didn't feel right the whole way through. I really don't like that the female character was used in that way. I also really didn't like Jackson's like inability to be patient with Jake, as Jake was exploring his sexuality and coming to terms with his feelings and what he wanted, because like Jackson was already really comfortable within his own sexuality, and so I think he could have had that patience for Jake and let him kind of work things out on his own time, and instead he kind of said that he had patience for Jake and then like pressured him And like that's how it came across to me anyway when I was reading it. And I just kind of thought to myself, like, you know, you should be more aware that these decisions and these like thoughts and these feelings are such like a huge thing to come to terms with. And just because you've been comfortable in your like sexuality and your person for so long doesn't mean that everybody's going to feel the same way. Like everybody's path to self-acceptance is different. So there just needed to be like an element of more patience, I think, with it. And honestly, it just, the whole thing just rubbed me up the wrong way and I really didn't enjoy it. So this was a 2-star for me and I was so disappointed by that. Next up we had Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Malors. This was a 5-star read. This was incredible. I actually wrote some extensive notes about this, so I'm going to read from my phone so that I'm not like stopping and starting and seeming a bit like disengaged. But basically Cleopatra and Frankenstein is a slice of life character study of a group of New Yorkers as they navigate life, love and relationships. Told through multiple POVs, each character interlinks with the wider group and fleshes out over an 18-month period of life in New York. So we follow Cleo, a British student, who meets Frank at a New Year's Eve party and marries him shortly after to keep her visa. We then also have Quentin, a Polish immigrant dealing with his gender identity and sexuality, Santiago, a celebrated chef struggling with his weight, and Frank battling with his childhood, his masculinity and his alcohol dependency, as well as a huge cast of other supporting characters, all of which are incredibly vibrant and incredibly well fleshed out and just so much fun to read from and to read about. So this, in my opinion, is the novel that Sally Rooney wishes she had written. There are so many quotes in this that were just completely outstanding and so many moments that have my jaw absolutely dropping. I feel like if you are a fan of Sally Rooney, then you're definitely going to appreciate this because it's just on another level. It's so good. So the writing in this book truly blew me away. There were moments that literally like pulled me to a stop and like wrenched my heart out of my chest. They were like painful moments. It's painfully relatable. It's beautiful from the outset. One thing that I kind of came to the conclusion while reading this is that I really enjoy reading from characters that are deeply flawed, because to me they feel a lot more real. Like nobody in the world is perfect and we all have our own issues and our own things that we're dealing with. So when you're reading like a character in a book who doesn't seem to have any of those issues and just seems to like bumble through life and is fine, I find that really unrelatable and really like just unrealistic, whereas each of these characters is deeply flawed and on a level quite deeply unlikable as well. And so that made me like them more because they felt so real and so believable and so relatable. And I think that was the magic of this book. It's wholly in the characters, like 110% in the characters. So I also really like the little Britishisms that are like sprinkled throughout this book. The author actually grew up in England and I feel like that becomes really obvious the more that you read through it, especially because the main character's British as well. There are just little things and it just made me smile so much, especially as a Brit who's going to live in America. I loved it and I just took a lot of just comfort from this book as well, which is one of the reasons why it is one of the books that I'm taking with me to the States. I just really loved it and I wholly recommend every single person picking this book up if they haven't done yet, because it was just so good and so beautiful and so raw and so visceral, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So then I read one from my Kindle. I read Dark Citadel and I gave it 3 stars. So this is the second book in the Club Shadowlands series, which is a very smutty series and basically it follows it's like a series of novellas and it follows this like BDSM club basically. So each book is a new woman or man going to the club and then them kind of exploring their, I guess, relationship with BDSM. So I gave it 3 stars. It was okay, but just average and definitely more smut than anything else. But I think with these books, that is what they're for more than anything. You know, they're only novellas as well, so I don't think you're going to get a huge amount of plot. I think the biggest reason that these books are written is for the smut. So I enjoy the world it's set in, and I think it's probably a healthier and more realistic depiction of BDSM than books such as like 50 Shades, which I know got a lot of criticism from the BDSM community for not being really realistic and, you know, not really portraying the community in a good light. One thing that I will say as well is that in both of these books the main female character is plus size as well, and I kind of really appreciate the plus size representation. It was nice to read in like a smutty romance because I feel like you don't get that all too often, so that was a good thing. Then I read Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, which if you have watched my recent reading vlog you already have seen my thoughts and feelings on this. I gave this one 4 stars, which is interesting because I actually really hated the first book in this series, so I was very surprised to get as much enjoyment from this one as I did. But this is a soaring adult political fantasy set in the stunning world of Daevabad, which is basically a world of jinn, and it's so good. It's very vibrant, it's very beautiful, it's very atmospheric, it's very magical, and I really, really enjoyed that. So politics and fantasy novels is something that I really, really enjoy reading about, which is something that I never expected actually when I was younger, but I really, really enjoy reading about like complex political systems, and much of this book is heavily set in like politics of the world and the political maneuvers of the royal family and their kind of relatives, and with this installment kind of heavily relying upon those political structures, I definitely found myself way more engaged than I did with the first one. I also found myself definitely a lot more connected to the characters in this one, and then really caring about the journeys they were going on, which was nice, because again in the first book I just didn't have that connection, like I just didn't care, and in this book I really started to care, so much so that I actually ordered the third book, which was not what I expected to be doing at all. I think it's mostly just because the world to me in this one became so much more vivid and so much more rich, and I just really, really loved exploring it through the story. I also really love the representation in this book as well. There's lots of LGBTQ rep in this, there's lots of disability rep, and I just appreciated both so much, because I think fantasy can sometimes fall into the habit of not being very inclusive at all. So it was just nice to read, and I really, really appreciated that, and I just really enjoyed it so, so much. So I definitely am starting to recommend the David Bad trilogy actually. I will reserve my final judgment until I read the third book in the series, but I've enjoyed the second book and it's definitely made me excited to pick up the third one and to like delve back into the world and just, yeah. Okay, so next book that I read, again, will be of no surprise to anybody who's watched my recent vlog, but that is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. So this is the fake dating trope. This is a kind of an enemies to lovers kind of trope. It's so good. So this book follows Luke, who is the reluctant son of two ex-pop stars from the 80s, and Oliver, who is a barrister. And basically Luke has found himself getting quite regularly papped in very uncompromising positions, and so his work, he works for a PR firm and he's in the middle of this huge like fundraise, and his boss basically calls him into her office one day and says he needs to clean up his image if he wants to keep his job, because all of the fundraiser investors are starting to pull out. So Luke decides that the one thing that is going to scrub up his image well is if he gets himself a respectable boyfriend. Enter Oliver. So Luke and Oliver have met each other before, and to all appearances completely disliked each other, but their mutual friend says that Oliver is the perfect person to help Luke recover his reputation, and so becomes just the greatest adventure in fake dating that I've ever read. So again, I took kind of extensive notes here, and I'm just going to like word vomit them at you, but I loved it so much. Oh my god, literally everything about this was perfection. The banter, the wit, the Britishisms, the found family, the dynamic between the friends, the romance, the characters, and the fact that it was so real. People are damaged, and damaged people hurt people. It shows that actions have consequences, and not everything can always be wrapped up in a pretty ribbon at the end of the book. I went feral for their relationship and need the next installment immediately, and I stand by that 100%, which is why this isn't actually the next book I read, but it was the one after. I also then read Husband Material by the same author. So this kind of follows a similar structure to 4 Weddings and a Funeral, in that it includes 4 weddings and a funeral, and basically it shows Oliver and Luke kind of at the next stage of their relationship 2 years after the events in Boyfriend Material, and it shows kind of the pressure that they're under to take the next level with their relationship. You know, all of their friends are getting married and having babies, and there's this pressure on both of them to figure out if that's what they actually want for themselves and their lives. I loved this as well. This I only gave 4 stars. I thought for much of the way through it was going to be a 5-star read, but the ending just kind of fell a little flat for me, and there was a few things here and there in it that I just didn't enjoy quite as much as the first one. But overall I think it'd be a 5-star duology, and I believe the third book is coming out at some point next year as well, which is really exciting. I absolutely loved it though, and I certainly recommend this one. And I mean, realistically you could read this as a standalone if you wanted to. This is just kind of like a bit of a follow-up. I've got high hopes for the third one. It's called Father Material, so I guess we all know kind of where things are going there. I'm so excited if I get to see Luke and Oliver as dads. Anyway, my reading then took a bit of a turn because I read Know My Name by Chanel Miller, which was a 5-star read, but it took a turn because obviously the subject matter of this is quite hard-hitting, to say the least. So this is a memoir, and it's Chanel's account of being the survivor in the Stanford sexual assault case. So it talks obviously heavily about rape culture in universities and the effects that can then have on the victims. And this was a very emotional read. I alluded to why in my TBR video and I will not be mentioning it again. But yeah, this was just a very, very good read. It was very hard, very triggering, very emotional, but ultimately a very rewarding experience, and it just kind of makes you feel less alone with things that you may have gone through in your life. And I felt it was quite like affirming in that way and quite comforting in that way as well. So I'm not going to say I enjoyed reading it, because I don't think it is a book that you enjoy, but it's certainly a book that I very much appreciated and needed to read, and I loved it for that reason and that reason alone. And then finally we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, which I actually finished last night and is a 5-star read. I read so many 5-star reads this month. This was just absolutely fantastic. I was hooked from the very first chapter. Honestly, this is giving me like the same feelings I had when I read Zodiac Academy last year and just couldn't put it down, and the same feelings I had when I read ACOTAR and Throne of Glass for the first time, and I was just so sucked into this fantasy world. Any author that can make me feel that way is just going to be an auto by author from now on, so I cannot wait for the second installment, and I am so glad it's only a few months away. Like, I cannot tell you how excited I am for it. But I honestly loved everything about this again. I love the world, I love the dragons, I love the romance, I love the characters. I am so excited and intrigued to see where this is going to go in the next book, because obviously it leaves it off on such a cliffhanger. But this to me fully deserved the hype. Like, I was worried going into it that I wasn't going to enjoy it as much as everyone else. The hype was real, the hype was deserved. I loved this book, I loved it so much. 5 stars, just 5 stars all round. And so that concludes my July wrap up. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments below what books you've been reading this month. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and don't forget to subscribe if you are new, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye friends.